Welcome to Catskill Weiss Schwarz. In today's video, I will be discussing my experience at the January 2026 Duluth, Georgia Regional, which just happened this past weekend, January 17th and 18th. I played Weiss this weekend. It was on Saturday, the 17th. It was the only Bushy Road game I played this weekend since I don't play Vanguard or anything else. I'm just going to discuss how I did, my matchups, overall thoughts about the tournament, and my experience with it. Without further ado, let's get started. Starting off, I'm going to discuss how I did in the tournament. I again only played Weiss on Saturday. Overall, I got 20th place. I had a 5-2 record, so 5 wins, 2 losses, and I was playing Bar Pants Bane Dream. The list that I was playing, I could make a whole video about it. However, I already made a video on my Bane Dream deck a while back, and the only thing that changed between that video and the list I used at this regional was I took out the 2 copies of the 2-1 stock swap that I was playing, and I added in 1 copy of the level 1 green anti-change backup and the level 3 off finisher Oblivionist that's add-on core step pay 2 to burn 2. I know a lot of people would find it a little odd to not be playing the stock swap. I love that stock swap. I think it's very good. My big issue with it is that I've been finding through my testing, which has been going on for months and months and months, that at 2 copies, I just never see it. There's no bonder to it. There's nothing that just lets you top check for events and just add an event. The only times I would really ever see it would be like opening hand, and then I'm stuck either holding on to it the entire game or getting rid of it and hoping I see it again later. It also made me whiff my Amoris more than it should. I saw it more on my Amoris when she would attack and sack a character to reveal top. It would cause her to whiff more than I would ever see it in my hand. I just noticed that was a pattern that's been going on for a while now, and the solution was either to up the number of copies I play so that I am more likely to see it, or to take it out and put in cards that I had been missing or felt I'd been missing. For this specific tournament, it wasn't a bad decision. It worked out well. My opponent never had so much stock or was so compressed where I really felt I needed the stock swap that I probably wouldn't see anyway. The 2 cards I added in, I did use a decent chunk, especially the anti-change backup. I think I used that 3 or 4 times throughout the tournament, and one of those times it was pretty much useless because my opponent just triggered a standby on their final swing and just brought back the thing that I had gotten rid of. But that was more luck than anything. The other times it was pretty great. The level 3 Oblivionist was very good. It did win me a game, helped me push a little bit of extra damage. I had a lot of stock, and that last 2 was exactly what I needed to win. The card is great. I wish I could up that to a second copy. I'll have to play around with my deck list. Overall, my deck performed really well. I was very happy with it. Outside of refreshing, I think a total of 7 or 8 climaxes throughout the course of the tournament, which was very frustrating. Which is not really the deck's fault, I suppose, but outside of that, I wasn't really frustrated with my deck. It performed very well. I was very, very happy with it. It was a lot of fun to play. I've been on the deck, or variations of this deck, since July when the set came out. I really enjoyed playing it. I didn't feel like it had a bad matchup against pretty much anything, really. It was just overall pretty great. 20th place, there was top 16, so just barely missed it. I feel like very much that saying that's always a bridesmaid, never a bride. I have come so close to top 16 so many times now. I've gotten 18th, 19th, 20th, 22nd, 24th. I've gone X2 at a bunch of singles, and it was always top 16. I think I remember a couple times before they changed the rule. It used to just be, for anyone who doesn't know, it used to be just a straight up top 8, and then relatively recently, they changed it so that it could be top 16 or top 32, depending on attendance. And I did go X2 at a couple of regionals shortly before they implemented that rule for singles, and was just a little bit too outside of it. So always gone X2 plenty of times. Can't quite seal the deal, but overall I am happy. 20th place. It was out of 140 or 144. I forgot exactly where Bushy Road capped it, but pretty good record overall. And my games, for the most part, 6 out of 7 were enjoyable against good people. So it was a fun tournament overall, and I enjoyed playing in it. I'll discuss my each round, whether I won, lost, what I went up against, and just some brief thoughts about it. Round 1, I played against the 8 Pants Ayakashi. This is the Suzu that just aims to heal a whole bunch at 2. My opponent was very nice. If I remember right, and I could be thinking about a different opponent, but I think it was this one, he said he's been in 2 regionals, and he got dead last at one of them, and he got like 6 or something at a different one. He played well. I was definitely ahead in the game, just in resources and things like that, until he got to 2. Once he got to 2, he had clocked himself up to 2-6, and then he did double Suzu, heal down to 2-2, I think it was. And from that point, the game did get harder for me. I thought that I was doing pretty well, but I just kept pushing him to 2-5 or 2-6. I wasn't able to get him to 3, and he every turn was either triggering a Pants Climax during his attack phase and getting back the Suzu level 3 Pants Climax so that he could heal down again the next turn, or he had the Matsuri. That is clock yourself, look at top 3, I think, or 4, and add a card. I'm not sure if he ever grabbed one off of that, but he used it multiple times, so I assume at some point he did. He did loop it a lot, and then after like 3 turns of that, the game did start to shift a little bit, just because he kept healing so much. And my deck can heal very well, but it can't heal as well as Suzu, and unfortunately I don't play any level 0 bombs in my deck, and I just don't have anything that with enough power to get over that at level 2. My early play healer only goes up to 10-5 with Climax, and I don't have anything in my deck that can boost attack power on my turn at level 2. At least not as high as Suzu, because she does sit pretty big, and for anyone who doesn't know, she can't be chosen. So at that point the game did start to shift. However, it went back in my favor once I finally was able to push him just barely to level 3. At that point, it was much easier for me mentally to know that I could kill him even from 3-0 if he healed down, than having to continuously come back from him being high 2, then going back down to low 2. And that is at that point I did close out the game. I think it was the turn after I pushed him to 3. But he played well. Game was fun overall. Definitely a lot of back and forth, and it was a interesting matchup for me. He seemed to know what he was doing with the deck, and I haven't really played up against that matchup too much. It can be scary if things go right for your opponent and they do just heal down that much. Even though Suzu's not great at closing out games, just being able to outgrind your opponent if they're not playing anything that can directly deal with it, even something as simple as a level 0 bomb, because Suzus are level 0 while they're on the board. For anyone who doesn't know, they also can't be chosen, which is one thing that makes them so difficult to deal with. But it's a good game overall. Round 2, I played against Itsuki from Quince. I won that matchup. He was playing the typical movie level 3 door combo, but instead of the typical level 1 Itsuki combo that is on attack, ditch a card, look at top 3, add 3 characters or a specific event to hand, he was playing the 2-1 full field early play that I believe its effect is at Encore Step. You could sack the Climax and look at up to 4 cards from top of deck and add up to 4 characters. It also sets really big cross turn for a card that can come out at level 1. I believe it was 9-5 before any sort of boost or something like that, but that's just a big body to be dealing with at 1, so that thing just stayed out for a while. My opponent was super nice and friendly, played well. He definitely, during the game, there were several moments where I saw plays that he could potentially make, and I kept hoping he wouldn't make them, but he just kept making all, in my opinion, the right decisions. His list was definitely interesting. I have played Eitor Itsuki a ton, and he had some choices in his deck that I never really considered, but they worked so well, and I did struggle against them quite a bit, that it did make me want to test out his version, or as close to his version as I could. Just because it ran well despite not being the normal quote unquote meta build of Itsuki. If a deck works, it works, so it doesn't really matter if it doesn't fit with what most people are playing, because it did just work really well. I played some cards I always wanted to play but didn't think they would work well enough, and then he played them and I saw that they can work really well if your deck is built around them and you're a player who knows how to use them properly. An enjoyable match. He got to level 3 first. He kept mokoing me with I think he double Itsuki combo. Saw 2 clean cards, and then I canceled on 3, so I was getting pretty compressed at that point, so really was just up to a matter of whether the climaxes were in the top 2 or the 3rd or the 4th card. So that was pretty lucky, but I was also like mid 2, so it would have been tough to kill me unless he saw 2 climaxes on both Itsukis. But he played well. I'm not sure anyone else could have played it any better. And then once I got to 3, I was able to kill him. I forgot if it was double Tamori or triple Tamori, or double Tamori and the Anon off finisher, but it was some combination of that. Definitely an enjoyable match overall. Round 3 was against Azure Lane. It was the 8 bar list with the level 1 Noshiro Sisters combo and the level 2 Shamanto combo. This match I did win. The beginning of the game was a little rough for me because he played out some numbers of cats that were backed up by a brainstorm that gave power to level 0s, I think, that were in front of it. His cats were like huge and they swung in mostly direct lanes, and I just ate all of it, which was pretty brutal. Then luckily for me, I guess, after that I did start canceling a bit more. He started missing on his brainstorms a bit too much, which seemed kind of unfair, but it is what it is. Sometimes he blind stocked a bar once, which we only knew after he triggered a bar, and then he paid it out the next turn that he had blind stocked a bar. So that, on top of his brainstorms whiffing a lot, plus on top of the fact that the level 1 combo he was playing, which I've played a ton, I really like that combo, the Noshiro combo. It does require a reverse to actually attempt to plus, and I play the deck a lot, so I know its strengths and weaknesses. My deck, fortunately, is very good at just giving me empty lanes because I have the level 0 Amoris, so it's easy to crash in a lane and sack something else and still get some advantage out of it. So I was doing my best to deny him reverses so that he could only plus with the 1-0 Noshiro Sister that you typically leave in the back, and that one is a far less good plus because you look at top 2 and then your opponent picks a card to add to your opponent's hand. So you just typically give them the worst card imaginable. Sometimes a plus is a plus, and that's really all that matters. But at that point, between things not really going right for him with his brainstorms, me denying his level 1 combo a bit, and I think a little bit of just bad luck on his part, I was able to just start out resourcing him. Steadily, my stock grew, whereas he had to keep spending a lot of stock every turn. My hand size was being maintained while his was slowly whittling down, until in the end, no matter pretty much what, as long as I was dealing damage, he just didn't have the hand or the stock to really compete at a certain point. I just had a lot of options that he didn't. I could heal a lot or just go for big damage, whatever it was. So the game started off pretty rough for me, and then it evened up a bit towards the middle and then became a little one-sided as it went on, and things just weren't going his way. But he was a nice opponent. It was a good game. I enjoyed playing against the deck, and it was a fun match overall. Round 4, I did win, but I'm struggling to remember exactly what I played against. I'm pretty sure it was Standby Choice Azure Lane with the Unicorn level 3 Choice combo. My opponent was nice, and I could picture his face. For some reason, I'm really just blanking on this entire match. I don't know why. I just remember that I won. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm pretty sure I did kill him when he was like mid-high 2. If I could be wrong, if I remember right, because I don't remember him playing his level 3 combo out at any point. But good game overall, mostly because I just remember that my opponent was nice, even if I can't remember the specifics of that match. Round 5, this was a double loss. I played against Rent a Girlfriend. I was playing against the Sumi Negsoul level 3 combo that can come out at 2, and if you burn it out via an event at 2, a specific event, you can't use backups during its battle, and you can't choose it till the end of the next turn. And it's actually, so it's pretty big, and it is it's a type of neg soul where I believe it's choose 2 characters, give -1 soul to each. This was the only match of the day that I actively didn't like, and it had nothing to do with my opponent's deck, which ran a lot better than I would have ever thought Sumi could do. So in one sense, I was pleasantly surprised to see that Rent a Girlfriend could actually be pretty good. Once he brought those things out, I was having a bit of a hard time. However, my opponent was not the friendliest. He was pretty combative, kind of rude. Round one, I sat next to him and a friend of mine, and even before the round started, he was already giving my friend a hard time about something really stupid. And at least rounds 2 and 3, and maybe 4, but at least rounds 2 or 3, we were seated next to each other or 2 seats down from each other, and he wasn't pleasant with his other opponents either. I don't know why he was there. He didn't seem like he wanted to be there. It didn't seem like he was enjoying himself at all, even though he was winning the earlier rounds. A very unpleasant person to be around. I'm not here to like bad talk anyone, but he's playing a Nexo combo. We're getting close to time. Time just ran out. It was my turn. I'd only swung once. I still had 2 more swings with my level 3 combo left, and he just wanted me to give him the win when time was called because he didn't think I'd be able to kill him, and he acted like I was the bad guy when I said no. Now I know there are people, and I'm not going to comment on how they want to handle double losses. I could say that I have been a part of games where maybe I did double losses a certain way. Maybe certain people would do it that way, maybe certain people wouldn't. I like to think that if I had no shot at winning in past games, and rather than a double loss, maybe, my opponent did manage to win in the last second if I knew that I had no chance and that I just didn't feel like it was fair to them to not win when they would have won. We have had just 5 more minutes at most. This game was pretty close though, so it wasn't one of those situations, and he was pretty rude about it. And apparently he got a double loss with somebody else too. And then somebody posted about it in the Facebook group, and people were commenting. Just a kind of unpleasant person. Probably the worst experience I've had with an opponent at a regional for Weiss, which is a pretty good track record because I've been going to regionals for a long time now, and the majority of my opponents have been nice, friendly. Even the ones who weren't talkative or anything like that, they weren't rude. So this was the only person that was just flat out hostile almost, and I don't think I was the only one that felt that way. So 1 bad game out of 7 is not bad in my opinion. Round 6, I lost against 8 standby Azure Lane. I believe he went on to get second, if I remember right. It was second or third. He was a super nice guy, played well. He was bleeding hand a lot throughout the game, so I did have an advantage there. He did stick some big damage, so that kind of made up for the fact that I just had a bit more resources than he did. I got to level 3, and I chose to heal instead of closing out the game because he didn't have many cards, and I just didn't think he'd be able to kill me. I got very unfortunate that after my first swing where I just healed, I had 2 other cards, and they both triggered a bar, and both of those bars blind stocked a pants climax. So at that point, I was already out 5 climaxes if you count the one on my board. I just didn't know that I blind stocked 2. I think I already had a climax in my waiting room, so I was really out 6. Except 2 of them, importantly, 2 of them were in my hand, and unbeknownst to me, 2 of them were in my stock, and there were only 2 in my waiting room, and then my opponent Fumio'd me and shoved a whole bunch of cards back into my deck and only 1 extra climax, and when I was shuffling back in, that's when I realized that I just blind stocked 2, and that was a very disheartening feeling. Now, I was at 3-0, and he had almost no resources. He was able to play out his graph, and graph gives characters the ability to, when they get a reverse, to put the reverse character on top of deck. He didn't even need that, to be honest. I looked at the top of my deck after he won because he did win from 3 vanilla swings. That Fumio put in a ton of work. It was my fault. I should have just gone for the kill, because if I had, I had the Soyo Brainstorm that gives top check 2, and I stopped at 1. If I'd gone to 2, I would have seen a climax. At that point, I would have decided to do the mill rather than have a climax go to stock. And if I had done that, I would have milled 4 climaxes, and that would have been burned 4 times. I don't think he would have survived that, plus 2 more swings, plus an off finisher swing from Anon. So I don't know why I stopped at 1. At that point, the day was getting later. I was getting more tired. But he was a very good player, obviously, if he got second. it was a good game overall. I really enjoyed it. But even if he didn't have the graph to put cards on top, characters on top of my deck, he didn't need that extra sort of, you can't say guaranteed damage, but essentially that's what it helps do. It helps, what's on top, so it's one less card that could be a climax on top of your deck. My one of three climaxes in my deck at that point was so far down, he could have just swung direct, like, and triggered on each of them, and have been swinging for like 4 in each lane, and I would have just eaten it all. That's how little climaxes I had and how many cards he put back with the Fumio. So he did a very, very good choice. He had a brainstorm, I think, to get the Fumio, or he had to use some salvager to get the Fumio. I don't remember exactly, but he got to it, and it worked very well for him. Good game overall, though. Definitely one of my more enjoyable games. Losing never feels good, but I will say losing in a game like that feels way better than losing in a double loss in the way that I did the previous round against an opponent with such an attitude problem. I did not feel bad after having that loss in round 6. Felt bad, but for different reasons in round 5. So round 6 was far more enjoyable despite the fact I still lost. The final round of the tournament, I played against Caligura, and I won. My opponent was also super nice and friendly and all that. He wasn't as familiar with Bane Dream, so which probably led the game might have gone differently if he had, though it's sort of tough to say. It was a very interesting game. He had a tough time deciding what to mulligan. I think it was because, though he never said, but based on what he did at level 1, where he just triple comboed with the climax for Cali, I think he had a lot of his pieces for level 1 and was deciding if he should get rid of them. That's my guess. He only played out one character for 2 turns at 0, and one of them was the Aqua Ricky, and I specifically searched out my level 0 clean cut that is also on reverse, clock swap your opponent with the character that was reversed with the top card of their clock. I had to play a bar climax just so that they would equal power, because at that point it was pretty clear to me that he just didn't have a great hand, and he was probably relying on that Aqua Ricky to get him some advantage, and he was kind of at a lot of climaxes, so I thought just having extra soul wouldn't be a bad thing. He did triple Cali the following turn. He was pushed to 1, and I think that helped him quite a bit, make the game a bit more even, because at that point it was getting a little skewed my way. Then a couple turns, just back and forth. He started retaining more hand, finally building some stock, so that was good for him. I was bleeding hand a little bit, but I was getting a lot of stock. So once I got to 2, the game got kind of interesting, because at that point I was so far ahead on damage because he had that rough early game that I was 2 and he had gotten to 3. He was actually 3-2. Now he had both of his Guras, and he played them out to his back row just to heal down. I think he knew that would just double Guras, even though Gura is incredibly strong, and could definitely close out games from mid 2. Doing it from 2-0 would be a challenge unless everything just went perfectly. So he put him in his back row to heal down to 3. At that point, though, I was still like low 2 once I got to my next turn, and I don't think he knew that Bane Dream has the Amoris, which, in addition to its 2 other really good effects, also stuns a character on play until the end of the next turn, so that they can't move till the end of the next turn. So when he put the Guras in the back, for the next 3 turns, I just kept looping, because I wasn't getting pushed to 3. He actually stopped attacking me 1 turn. I think he stopped at 1 attack so that I wouldn't get pushed to 3. I just kept stunning it over and over and over, which could definitely be frustrating. Now, he was still getting cards out and rebuilding some stock and things like that. I would overplay one of my Amorises with a Rico just so I could grab it right back and play it again, even if I was going minus hand, and at that point I was starting to bleed hand a little bit. My brainstorms were not going as great as they could have been, even though I was doing 2 brainstorms a turn. But the Amoris, just looping it over and over and over on both of his Guras every single turn, was such a, for me, I guess it was a big win, because I was slowly starting to take more damage. So as I was taking more damage, I really couldn't afford to let both of his Guras move up. I think at one point I felt safe enough where I was compressed enough where I was only, without really getting rid of most, if not all, of my hand, I only played one Amoris for one of the turns I was at 2 and just stunned one of the Guras. And then in the end, he did eventually get to a point where I think he moved up. It could have just been one. I think it was 2 Guras though. But I just ate ones and canceled on 4s and things like that. And then I got to 3, and then I won from there. But he was a really nice opponent. He did mention that he hadn't played Weiss in a while. I think he very much knew his deck inside and out, and he was such a good player that I'm sure he knew whatever meta he had last been a part of. He just probably just wasn't that familiar with Bane Dream, because there were a couple of instances where there were cards like that he probably just didn't know that Bane Dream had them or whatever, and probably would have played differently. But he definitely seemed like the type of skilled player who, when he plays more and makes himself more familiar with the meta, that it would have probably been a very different game for me. I play every week and keep up to date and all that stuff. I think it would have been a bit more even. Now, he did have that rough beginning, but he did make up for it very well. And then he was able to get double Gura, and that was still terrifying. At that point, double Gura is still very scary, and I knew he had the climax. He had gotten it out at one point, but with a climax swapper or something like that. So that opponent was super great. So that was the end of the last round before I went to Top Cut, and then that's when I found out I got 20th, and they were only going to top 16, which is whatever. I still am very happy with how my deck did, aside from refreshing like 8 climaxes throughout the course of the tournament, which was really annoying. That's not really anything that my deck does wrong, just bad luck. The deck did perform really great. There were cards that I used that I didn't think I'd use as much, such as my bouncer / D-leveler. It's an alarm D-leveler or an on-play bouncer. That card came in pretty clutch in multiple games. Even though it's not something I use most games when I'm just doing regular testing, but at this regional it came up a lot. So much I almost wanted a second copy sometimes because it just put in a lot of work. But overall the deck did great. Tamori's a great finisher. Oblivionus is busted. The level 1 changer is busted. It wasn't for the most part until I intentionally just started doing things just to stop my opponent from doing stuff. I just always had a full hand or like close to it with a good amount of stock. And most of my games are good and fun. Opponents were cool. So very enjoyable. 20th place, I did feel like that saying, always a bridesmaid, never a bride, because I have been to 6 regionals, or I think this one makes 7 actually, where I've gone where it's top 16 and I've been 18th, 19th, 20th, 22nd, 24th, 26th, all with an X2 record, where that, one, if I'd have been X1, then I probably would have made it into top 16. But at some point it will happen. The next regional I'll be going to most likely is Philly at the end of March. I'll probably be playing the same deck, some variation of it, since Oshinoko Volume 2 will not be out then. Doesn't come out for an extra week after the regional, I think. And this deck performed well into every single matchup. Maybe I'll change it around a little bit, but it really just flowed so well. I never felt bad playing it. It just has answers to everything. And I did play, aside from playing 3 Azure Lane decks actually, but they were pretty different or different enough from each other where my deck was just very versatile enough to deal with those different types of decks. So overall, happy with my performance, happy with how my deck did, happy with 6 out of 7 of my opponents, and definitely something that I'm looking forward to going to the next regional, and hopefully can just move 4 places higher if it's top 16 and actually make it into Top Cut for once. And now to talk about the next aspect of the tournament, which will be my thoughts beyond the performance of my playing ability or my deck itself. I'm going to talk a bit beyond just the matches of it and talk more about the tournament environment itself and that sort of thing. So just topics that don't directly relate to my games or the act of playing. The first will be the venue. I've never been to Georgia before, so I've never been to this venue. The venue was nice and big, had lots and lots of space, which is sort of disappointing when Bushiroad decided to rent not the biggest room, especially because Weiss was capped at, it was either like 140 or 144 or 145 or something like that. It was about 140. And from what I heard, 50 Weiss players were turned away because they were at capacity for Weiss. Vanguard was also playing the same day, and Vanguard had about 500 people, I'm told, that entered their tournament, and they had 100 people that were turned away. So the venue had plenty of space. It didn't seem like there was a lot going on that weekend. I have been for other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Been to venues where they got more people than they were expecting, and I'm not saying this happens every single time. It's obviously there's a variety of factors that go into it, but I do know that I've been to regionals where they decided to rent a little more space quickly on the fly when they realized that they would have more players than anticipated. That way they don't have to turn anyone away. Now, I know these tournaments are free. Bushiroad does not charge for regionals. It's still disappointing to hear that 50 Weiss players were turned away and 100 Vanguard players were turned away, and I don't even play Vanguard, when they could have just rented a little bit of a bigger space. Even from the get-go, they could have probably just done that. I know there's always that fear that you won't need it and then you spent extra money for no reason. I don't know. It was kind of disheartening. The room really wasn't the biggest. But another big factor for me as a Weiss player, since I don't play Vanguard, was how Weiss continues to appear like the unwanted stepchild of the Bushiroad card games. The fact that they had such a bigger cap for Vanguard as opposed to Weiss. Now, I guess the fact that only 50 Weiss players were turned away when there was a 140 cap, and the fact that there were still 100 players roughly turned away when there was a 500 player cap for Vanguard, just goes to show that there are more Vanguard players and Weiss might be more of a collector's game. However, it still kind of stinks feeling like Bushiroad just does not care about the game you spend so much time and money investing in. It also sucks for the people for both games, those 150 or so people that, you could, at least for Weiss, I don't know about Carve 5 Vanguard, I assume it's the same. You can sign up for these tournaments ahead of time, so that way you guarantee your spot as long as you show up on time. But still, imagine being those 150 roughly people that maybe traveled a good distance, whether it was on a plane or whatever, to get there, and only to be turned away because they rented a very small hall in this very large convention center. The hall we were in is one of the smaller halls that I have been in for a regional level event for a trading card game, and I've been to multiple different games regionals that are held in this sort of size convention center. So just a little disappointed in that, but also, I don't know, mainly, but maybe equally disappointed that Weiss really seems like it's just almost something that Bushiroad just puts up with, is sort of like this feeling. Now, that's nothing about the judges or anything like that. The couple of times I interacted with the judge, which was never on a ruling question, because Weiss is actually pretty simple, where I've almost never had to call a judge, but just through other things, they're super friendly and supportive and engaging and all that stuff. So nothing against the judge staff or the Bushiroad staff or anything like that. Just, I guess, maybe the overall team at Bushiroad that makes certain decisions. It'd be nice if I would be willing to even pay an entry fee if it helped convince Bushiroad that they could put that money towards a slightly bigger thing. I guess some people really might care about the fact that the tournament's free and be very angry if the tournament was no longer free, but I think a lot of people have to travel for these regionals. I don't think most people were coming from the local Georgia area. I think most people were probably renting some sort of overnight accommodations, and whether it's a lot of driving or a train or a bus or a plane, I do think there were a lot of people there that had to pay money for that sort of thing. So if they're willing to pay money to get there and to stay there, odds are they'd be willing to spend like $20 to enter the tournament. And if it helps provide a slightly better environment, I would say try it out. Or if Bushiroad really doesn't want to pay people paying to enter their regionals, I don't know, maybe just rent a slightly bigger space so no one gets turned away. It wasn't necessarily cramped, but it was close enough at times. So that was a little disappointing. Even though the venue itself was actually very nice, it reminded me of a college campus, and I am looking forward to the next time that I go there. Next will be the vendors. This is not like a knock on the vendors or anything like that. I think it's just more, it reflects a lot of what I sort of said about when I discussed just now about the venue itself, is how much Weiss just seems to be such an afterthought of an afterthought of an afterthought in terms of people even selling the game, like vendors selling products. There were there were 3 vendors, I think. Unless I missed something, one of the vendors seemed to only have Vanguard, which is fine. Not everyone buys Weiss, so what's the point of these vendors are just local stores that will travel to go to these events and vend there. So there's no point in them stocking up on Weiss if no one in their area is going to buy Weiss. I think I can make an entire long video that discusses maybe why people aren't buying Weiss, and there are some very simple reasons for that. It's not some deep conspiracy, and a lot of it, maybe Bushiroad can take some steps to improve it, but this is not the video for that. But the other 2 vendors that were selling Weiss, one had an okay selection, but it was still predominantly Vanguard. And the other vendor, turns out they did have a lot of Weiss, but when me and my group first walked by, we only saw Vanguard, which was surprising because we know that they do carry Weiss, but the thing is they didn't have the Weiss on display at all. It was only at some point when somebody asked that they started bringing out boxes of singles and searching for the specific singles. The fact that it was just all the vendors so heavily skewed towards Vanguard, some sealed product for Weiss, I suppose, but like it just seems like such an afterthought, and that really does stink when you're someone who's very, very passionate about Weiss and you don't care about Vanguard at all. And you know that that Weiss does do some decent numbers. It does rank pretty well in terms of annual sales for trading card games. Obviously, the player base versus collectors turnout is very different for Weiss to Vanguard. Vanguard can get so many people and still have double the amount of people trying to get in compared to Weiss that already had a much smaller cap. But I guess there's not really anything you could do to fix that situation in terms of vendors just not stocking very much of Weiss. If people aren't buying it in their areas, still disappointing. I think the biggest things to help with that would be things that Bushiroad can do, and maybe I will make a separate video at some point to talk about it. A tad disappointed there. It's not really the fault of anyone. It just is what it is. No one to blame except, I guess, Bushiroad, but whatever. But anyway, that was something that was just, I hope improves in the future is the bottom line. I know that one of the vendors in particular did have a ton of Weiss, and I bought a ton of Weiss from them before. I guess my big fear is the fact that even though they did bring the Weiss with them, that they weren't even putting it out until like someone asked them, and they had some extra space in the cases, but it seemed like Vanguard really was at the forefront. And if that's where you make your money at these sorts of things, and that's where you make your money, I totally get that. But when you're a seller that has a large inventory of Weiss and you do bring it with you, but you're not even focused on that, the next step is that you just stop buying Weiss and selling Weiss altogether, and that would be very disappointing. It's already tough enough to get stores to sell it, so the more stores that already sell it that stop selling it, the bigger hit it is to the community overall, which is sad when all I want is for the Weiss community to grow and prosper. Next thing I want to talk about is the time per round. Maybe some people will disagree with me on this. For Weiss, we only get 35 minutes. I think this is just too short. I think decks can do too much nowadays. The combos are taking longer. The types of things you can do in a lot of modern decks, they just require more time, even if you're not slow playing. I'm not saying we need a lot more than 35 minutes, but a lot of my games started getting close to that. Even when I felt that neither myself nor my opponent were slow playing or anything, I feel like just 5 minutes extra per round would really, really help. I know that 5 minutes over, let's say it's a 7-round Swiss, that does add up. But even at something like that, it's not a ton of extra time. Even then, it's barely more than half an hour over the course of the tournament. So it just stinks when you double loss a lot. Something I already felt before I got my double loss yesterday or over the weekend. I think if I remember right, it was my first double loss. I've either just won outright or just lost outright. But at other regionals, I've also felt the pressure because of the double loss rule and the 35-minute timer. Now, like, I get that some people might make the argument that you should be able to finish a game in 35 minutes, but sometimes when you're just at a higher level of play and the game is just you, as the tournament goes on and you're winning and you're playing against other people that are also winning, two skilled people going up against each other, it just might take longer just because you have to make more plays or different sorts of plays just to manage to maintain your current lead or not fall behind or whatever. I don't think that's a bad thing for the game at all. I enjoyed that aspect a lot, and I enjoyed it a lot this weekend. Just a tiny minor thing that was sort of bugging me throughout the tournament. Also because they didn't have, unless I completely missed it, but I don't think I did, they don't have a sort of like timer anywhere that's visible. I have been to regionals before where they have had a timer. This one did not have it, and sometimes I was not sure how much time was left until they made announcements. Now, I think typically the announcements were 10 minutes and 5 minutes, but sometimes even the 10 minutes just sneaks up on you, and it was just a tiny minor thing that I think would make a lot of people very happy, because no one feels good about traveling all the way there just to get a double loss when they, or maybe also their opponent, felt like if they just had those extra 5 minutes, they could have just closed out the game from there. Maybe that's something Bushiroad will change. They do seem more willing to change certain tournament procedures than they are with other aspects of the game. Maybe they'll listen to the feedback, and I think that would be a positive change, even if it's just 5 minutes, which I think is perfectly reasonable. I think that's enough for most people in modern Weiss. Next will be the running of the tournament. It actually ran very smoothly, despite the whole I don't like the double loss thing, or why aren't vendors stocking more Weiss. The actual running of it with the judges and the Bushiroad staff, super smooth. I can't remember what time the Swiss rounds for Weiss ended, but I want to say, I don't know, it could have been like 4 o'clock, something like that. We started early. We started pretty close to on time, I think. There was not much time in between rounds. Very little time. There were times where I finished my round and we finished right before time was called, and I didn't think I had enough time just to go to the bathroom before the next round was called. And sure enough, every time I thought that, the rounds were up almost immediately and I didn't have time. Which sucks for my bladder, but in terms of people that don't want to spend 12 hours in the convention center, that's really great. That is a positive thing that Bushiroad has done at every regional I have ever been to, especially when I've been to plenty of other trading card game regionals and larger events, and they can be run a lot more. Those can be run a lot more efficiently than they currently are. Bushiroad has always done a good job of keeping things moving, keeping things going, not having a lot of fat in terms of the time you spend doing things and needing extra time for stuff. So I did enjoy that. That was pretty great. It's always something to look forward to. That way, you still have the night to go do things and explore and whatever it is you want to do when you're traveling to one of these things. Especially 7 rounds is a lot before Top Cut, and even with how relatively quickly it goes, you do start getting pretty tired and out of it and all that stuff. So I think at one point after the tournament ended and I left and we went back to our hotel, and then we got dinner, and then we made a stop, and then we went back to our hotel, and then I think we were just sitting around, my group and I, talking and whatever for about an hour. And after that hour, I was super surprised that it was only 8 o'clock still, and that is because out of all the other card game tournaments I've been to, probably wouldn't even have left the venue by 8 o'clock at night, let alone finish the Swiss rounds, leave, go do other things, go get dinner, go get back to the hotel, go hang out for a while, and still have it be that early. So that is always something that's really nice with Bushiroad. there's really nothing I could say to improve it, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So hats off to them. Yeah, that is the last thought I had off the top of my head about the actual tournament and environment outside of my playing. Overall, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, had a great time on the trip. I definitely would like to travel a bit more for regionals. I generally go to the ones that are closest to New York. I've traveled a couple of times over the years, but now I do plan on traveling a bit more. Maybe more so for singles than for teams. It's just harder to get a bunch of people that are always willing to travel. But it was a ton of fun, and it was nice catching up with people and all that sort of thing. There were a lot of walking around the tables for Weiss. There were a lot of different decks that I was seeing, different decks within the same sets. It is nice to see that Weiss is currently having a pretty diverse format. There are a lot of different decks that can do well and are viable, and as someone who loves the actual gameplay of Weiss and the competitive aspect of it, it is nice to see that this is more of an open format than I think a lot of people, including myself, thought it would be going into the tournament season, and that it's definitely more of a diverse and open format than some formats we've had over the last 2 or 3 years, which were far more one-sided, where it felt like there was really only one top deck and everything else played second fiddle. We got some really great decks that do a lot of great things, not a ton of decks that do everything perfectly. Every deck has strengths and weaknesses that counteract other top decks in the meta, and even if you're not playing an S or an A tier deck, you can absolutely still compete. And it was easy to see as the tournament went on, and you would go to look at like the top tables, you could see a decent number of different decks, especially decks you wouldn't think would be doing so well as the tournament went on, but they were, and that's always nice to see. So overall, if you're someone who enjoys Weiss and enjoys playing Weiss, hopefully you have a regional near you. They're definitely worth going to. If you're someone who, like a lot of people with Weiss, don't have a locals, a lot of the time their nearest regional is the only way they really get to play Weiss throughout the year, which is something that, until I moved to a new part of my state, was something that I always had to deal with. So that can be a little disheartening. For anyone though that just wants to play Weiss and doesn't mind traveling a little bit, always a great experience. Overall, a pretty well run tournament, and definitely an enjoyable experience for people who have been to plenty of regionals. I assume they feel similarly, and that's why they keep going. For anyone that's on the fence about whether it's worth traveling, I'd say if you got even just one buddy that you could go with and hang out with, it's definitely worth the trip. They're just lots of fun. Get to meet a lot of people, get to see a lot of different types of decks, get to enjoy your hobby with a lot of other people that enjoy the same hobby and are as passionate as you are about it. And for a lot of people across the country who don't have local communities where they can share that passion, it is very nice to be able to go somewhere and just know you're surrounded by people who love the same thing that you do. So that will be it for this recap for my experience at the Duluth 2026 Regional. Thank you for watching. This has been Catskill Weiss Schwarz, and goodbye.